November 24th, 1971. Just picture a dark, violently stormy evening over the Pacific Northwest. A commercial airliner is slicing through heavy black clouds. Today, we're stepping right into the shadows to unravel a literal ghost story of the skies. We're looking at the only unsolved skyjacking in United States history, a man who somehow pulled off the impossible, stepped out into the freezing void, and just vanished without a definitive trace.
Listen to this. On November 24th, 1971, a well-dressed man boarded a flight with an ordinary ticket. A few hours later, he parachuted into the darkness with $200,000 in ransom and was never seen again. I want you to let the sheer weight of that statement sink in for a second. I mean, it sounds exactly like the plot of some crazy Hollywood thriller, right? But every single element of this midair heist actually happened.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly wrap our heads around the baffling nature of this case, we have to follow the precise timeline of Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305. Now, this was supposed to be just a quick, routine 30-minute commuter flight from Portland, Oregon up to Seattle, Washington. But it was heading directly into a massive, turbulent storm system, which basically set the perfect dramatic stage for a legend to be born. You know, what's truly fascinating to me is the remarkable normalcy of how it all began. A man walks up to the counter, identifies himself as Dan Cooper, and buys a totally standard $20 one-way ticket. He calmly boards the Boeing 727, and he's wearing this neat, dark suit, a black tie, a mother-of-pearl tie clip. He looks exactly like any other traveling executive from the era. Once he's seated in the last row, he just quietly hands a folded note to a young flight attendant. There's no shouting, absolutely no brandishing of weapons, just a simple note. Actually, at first, the flight attendant assumed it was just a businessman slipping her his phone number. She literally dropped it in her purse, completely unread. But then Cooper leans in and whispers, "Miss, you'd better look at that note." Well, when she finally opened it, the quiet normalcy of that flight just vanished in an instant. The note contained a terrifying, incredibly simple message: "I have a bomb." And just like that, mid-air, completely surrounded by dark storm clouds, the crew was trapped. And this didn't just remain an empty threat either. When the flight attendant asked to see the device, the man calmly unlatches his briefcase, and inside was a chilling sight. This incredibly neat arrangement of red cylinders, heavy wires, and a large battery. Boom, he had the crew's absolute attention. This quiet little exchange had just escalated into a full-blown, high-stakes hostage negotiation. And Cooper? He had a very specific set of demands before he was going to let a single passenger leave. So, what did he want? At the core of his demands was an absolutely astronomical sum, $200,000. To put that into perspective, in 1971, that was a life-altering fortune. We're talking the equivalent of nearly $1.5 million today. Furthermore, he demanded the cash specifically in unmarked $20 bills, along with 4 civilian parachutes. That incredibly specific request for the parachutes sent a clear, terrifying message to the authorities on the ground. They were dealing with someone meticulously prepared to just vanish into the sky. Meanwhile, down on the ground, a rapid, desperate scramble is unfolding. Let's look at the timeline. Hour 1, the Boeing 727 touches down in Seattle, and it is immediately surrounded by heavy FBI surveillance. Hour 2, Cooper actually keeps his word. Once the ransom cash and those parachutes are brought on board, he releases all 36 passengers who, by the way, had absolutely no idea they were even being held hostage this whole time. Hour 3, the aircraft is hurriedly refueled out there on the dark tarmac, and by hour 4, the plane executes a second takeoff. Cooper, the flight crew, and the cash are airborne once again. So the aircraft ascends back into the stormy night sky. Now, they were nominally heading south toward Mexico, but Cooper never actually intended to go to Mexico. He ordered the remaining crew to stay locked up in the cockpit, and then he dictated a highly unusual, very specific flight configuration. He wanted a low altitude of 10,000 feet, the landing gear deployed, the flaps lowered, and the cabin unpressurized. He was systematically, intentionally turning this commercial passenger jet into a tactical jump platform. Somewhere over the rugged, insanely dense forests of southwestern Washington, Cooper lowered the aft air stair of the 727. Wearing a parachute, clutching 21 pounds of stolen cash, he steps onto the stairs. And then he jumped. He jumps into pitch-black darkness, violent freezing rain, and a wind chill well below zero. I mean, it is incredibly difficult to overstate the sheer terrifying danger of diving from the rear stairs of a jetliner, flying at 200 miles an hour, straight into a roaring thunderstorm. The absolute second his boots left that aircraft, the narrative violently shifts from a high-altitude hostage situation to the ground below. The FBI instantly mobilized, launching what would ultimately become one of the longest, most exhaustive, and definitely most frustrating manhunts in American history. This massive case file was officially dubbed NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. The scale of this NORJAC operation was just unprecedented. The FBI launched a massive nationwide dragnet. They conducted exhaustive interrogations with the crew to build that now famous composite sketch of the hijacker. They meticulously mapped out the flight path to try and pinpoint the exact drop zone. Search parties, working right alongside military personnel, tramped through incredibly dense, unforgiving terrain, desperately looking for a parachute, a body, or maybe a bundle of cash. They even deployed SR-71 Blackbird spy planes to photograph the entire region from above. But despite deploying all that enormous manpower and literally cutting-edge resources, weeks turned into months, and then months bled into agonizing years. The adrenaline-fueled manhunt slowly just ground to a halt against a massive wall of dead ends. The sheer vastness of the Pacific Northwest wilderness had seemingly swallowed D.B. Cooper whole, and it forced investigators to pivot from this active, hot pursuit into basically sifting through a painfully slow trickle of clues. Because the physical evidence, it remained fascinatingly, almost frustratingly sparse. Literally just a black clip-on tie left behind on the plane, and the crew's vivid testimonies. The only major break didn't even arrive until 1980, nearly a full decade later. A young boy was digging on the sandy banks of the Columbia River at Tina Bar and uncovered 3 rotting packets of $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the ransom cash perfectly, but instead of solving the case, this discovery somehow only deepened the mystery. Did he drop it in the air? Did it wash downstream from a crash site somewhere? Still, absolutely no body was ever found. Which forces us to ask the ultimate question, the one that has literally obsessed investigators and amateur sleuths for half a century. Who exactly was D.B. Cooper? The total vacuum of solid evidence has allowed this massive ecosystem of theories to just flourish. Was he some highly trained military paratrooper using his specialized skills for a massive payday? Or, as the FBI later theorized, was he actually just a desperate, inexperienced civilian who simply didn't realize the basically suicidal nature of the jump he was making? It is really vital here to separate the hard, established FBI facts from the wild speculation that's grown around the legend. We know as undeniable truth that a man extorted the money, he jumped into a severe storm, and that a very small fraction of his cash was found years later. But the realm of speculation, it's vast. I mean, did he even survive that freezing plunge? Over the years, specific suspects absolutely came to the forefront. Men like Richard McCoy, a seasoned skydiver who pulled off a nearly identical hijacking just months later. Or Robert Rackstraw, a former Special Forces pilot with a really murky past. They became the leading theories. Yet despite massive investigations into these guys, nothing ever definitively stuck. More than 50 years later, the true identity of D.B. Cooper remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. A well-dressed man stepped out of an airplane into the freezing rain and completely, utterly vanished into the realm of legend. His story just continues to challenge our understanding of justice, survival, and the great unknown. So we're left to wonder, are his remains still hidden deep beneath the roots of a Washington forest? Or did D.B. Cooper pull off the absolute perfect crime and walk away into the night as a ghost?